Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 3 of my On Freedom podcast. My name is Marissa Price. I am a Black woman social worker, healer, educator, liberation coach, and I'm so happy you're here. This is a podcast I started just to go back, go back and kind of examine our history um, and connect it to things that we're experiencing in the present day. As some of you know, I have a background in Black studies. That was the track that I really wanted to be on. Unfortunately, some things happened in my college career, which I talk about on my Substack blog. If you're not subscribed, I will link it in the description section to subscribe. But yeah, some things happened that kind of threw me off track. And so I'm reclaiming this part of myself, which is my love of history and my love of the past and connecting it to what we're experiencing in the present day. Because we can really learn so much when we go back and realize that everything we're experiencing, someone has experienced before. And how did they navigate it? How did they get through it? So, the topic of today's episode is healing from the shame of going slow. And this came to me as I was walking this morning in Guadalajara, which I have relocated to from the US, and just walking slowly and seeing other people around me do the same. This has been a transformative journey of moving abroad, right? Going to a different place outside of the US. I am a relatively new international traveler, having only left the US for the first time 2 years ago. 2 years ago at this point. Um, my first trip being to Mexico City. And my partner and I went to Mexico City. That was our first time outside the US, right? So we jumped right into a humongous city with so many things to see and do. It was overwhelming. I got stung by a bee in a bakery. That's for another episode. But the kindness that I experienced on that first trip abroad transformed my life. And it allowed me to see what I had been experiencing in the US as not normal. Like I had proof of it for the first time. I always knew something within me is like, oh, this can't be it. This can't be it. And finally I had proof that something is very, very wrong with the way that society functions in the US. And we know that it is a society with the foundations of enslavement, land theft, and attempted genocide. And I say attempted because the messaging often around Indigenous folks in the US is that that was in the past, right? The continuing subjugation of Indigenous folks is something to really pay attention to. And one of the tools of oppression is to try to break the links that we have between the oppression that we're experiencing as groups with different characteristics, groups that have a past, a very painful past of harming each other, and to try to stoke those divisions even more so that we don't see the areas where our struggles overlap. And I think, again, going back to why I love history so much, if we go back to the 1970s, which is one of my favorite eras to study, the Black Power movement, if we study the Rainbow Coalition that was established during this time between Black folks, Indigenous folks, Asian folks, Latinx folks, who I believe term themselves Chicano, we see the overlaps in the ways that we were able to come together and build a coalition with shared interest. And that was the reason COINTELPRO was introduced, to disintegrate these bonds that had been formed over our shared experiences on the country, in the country that we now know as the US. So that's an aside. The topic of today's podcast: healing from the shame of going slow. Like I said, this came to me as I was walking slowly. I've been on a mission to really reorient my life around healing my nervous system. My nervous system has been shot. living in the US, being raised in such a fast-paced, inhuman society. My nervous system has been done. I have experienced anxiety, depression since I can remember as a child. And a lot of it is due to the school system that I was in. It treated me as if I could not rest. I could not take a break. I could not be harmed. I could not be affected by bullying, which I talk about a lot. You're just expected to keep going. And if you can't, you're pushed to the margins. Something's wrong with you. And that made me reflect on the Great Migration. I am the descendant of folks who traveled, who moved from the South, as I know it, Arkansas, to St. Louis, which is where I'm originally from. And reading The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson 2 years ago, I think at this point, that changed my life. If you have not read this book, I'll link it in the description section, but this is really, it chronicles three people's individual lives moving from the South, in various parts of the South, to the North or the West, to LA. And it chronicles the reasons why they made this decision to leave, the things that they experienced along the way, and the transition period, and the shame that they had around being from the South and now being the North and having to adopt an entirely new culture, right? You might as well be going to another country. And that made me reflect on the shame around going slow. So many of our ancestors descend from the South. And we were able to hold on to a lot of our culture, right? Coming from various nations in West Africa. And that's another thing. We didn't all come from the same nation, right? So we didn't all have the same customs, the same practices, the same beliefs. We were forced into a racial group, right? Race, as we know it, a concept created by white people that did not exist prior to that. But we were forced into this man-made racial category. Again, different customs, different beliefs, sometimes nations at odds with each other, having to come together and build this shared understanding of the world in order to survive. And so we were able to preserve a lot of those cultural elements that came from West Africa, of heating spirit, of going slowly, of taking your time, of sitting on the porch, of going into nature, right? We were able to preserve those and keep those despite the demands that we be robots under the system of capitalism with the foundation of enslavement. Enslavement wanted to literally transform human beings moving at a human pace into robots without breaks, right? Working on a set schedule, 12, 16-hour days, plus brutality, plus psychological torture. And that's why the shame around saying our ancestors are enslaved, you will never get me with that. Absolutely not. The fact that they survived unsurvivable conditions, how they made it out, how I am here as a descendant now telling their stories. And I believe that's one of the reasons why I'm here as I'm tapping into my spiritual gifts. Their messages and what they endured and what they experienced have always flowed through me. Always. And I believe I'm here to relay what they experienced, right? And so this thing that we knew how to do before, go slow, take our time, breathe deeply, we're having to return to these things. And shout out to Trisha Hersey of the NAP Ministry, who really has changed so many of our lives with her groundbreaking work, telling us that rest is not for them, it's for us. that going slow is not a luxury. It's a requirement. We're human beings, right? Doing public naps, community naps in public. Do you know how revolutionary that is when you think about things like vagrancy laws, loitering laws that were put into place after, as part of Jim Crow, segregation after the Civil War, after the Reconstruction, the failure, the intentional failure of Reconstruction. We see these laws pop up on the books in the US that are created out of thin air to basically reintroduce slavery. And so, how revolutionary is it for us to go slow, for us to take back our humanity and saying, no, I'm moving at a human pace. I'm no longer moving at a robot pace. You cannot force me to be a robot. I was put here as an individual, and that's something else I've been thinking about lately, identity. Shout out to Glenn Mazzini, Rashni Cope, who does so much great work around identity that really changed my life, being in her community, because I had never before sat with, who am I? Who am I? What things am I good at? What things bring me joy? It was all about survival, the trauma of poverty, me being the first generation in my family to not experience poverty. But I'm hearing stories again, like I told you, I carry visions that past generations have experienced. And so this weighs heavy on me. And so, how can we go slow? How can we take back what our ancestors already knew? This is not anything, brand new that we're teaching ourselves. We're having to go back. We're having to go back. And I don't think I finished my thought on identity, right? Who are we? Because we have been socialized as robots under the system of capitalism with the foundation of enslavement, as people just to work. Literally, that's the messaging we receive. We're just here on earth to work. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? We went through this entire journey. We know that coming to earth, the process of being in utero, of making that journey is not easy, both for the person who brings you here and for us, right? The people who are in utero. This is not an easy process. So for the messaging to be that we're just supposed to be here to labor, and that's it. And you know why it's proved false? Because not everyone gets that messaging. It's intentional. And so you take back your identity, you tell yourself, what am I good at? What do I like to do? When you are able to go slow, go slowly and not be in survival mode, which this society forces us into. But with the work of Trisha Hersey, Alicia Renese, literally putting out these messages that no, we actually have the power to resist this. This is not our lot in life. This is messaging from someone who created it. Why can't our imagination be even more powerful? Why can't our creations and the way that we view the world be at that level that we view how they regard the world? Why is their view of the world supreme? Because we know the consequences of it. It's our dehumanization. It's the plundering of the earth. That's what their imagination gets us. And so we're really being called to view our vision of the world, our understanding of the world, which our ancestors knew. We're being called to bring that back before this evil experiment of colonization and enslavement ever began. And we have the power to do that. So how can we go slow? How can we go slow? First is disintegrating the shame around resting, which we know is not human. This is not a human feeling. We don't come here not knowing how to rest. We just look at babies and we see they know how to rest. They know how to sleep. They know how to care, right? Take care, not take care of themselves, but like care, which means sleep for them. They know how to do these things when they come here. And so in a similar fashion, we have to go back. These things we've already learned them. They've been in place for thousands of years. And it is only recently in the course of human history that we've forgotten. We've forgotten because of the trauma that we've experienced. As I talk about on my channel, trauma impacts our memories. Trauma forces us into survival mode. So we can't even access our brains fully. Parts of our brain that we need to process deep memories of things we experienced in the past are not even able to be accessed sometimes when we've experienced such levels of trauma. And we think about the trauma of the transatlantic slave trade and how that has multiplied over generations, been passed down literally through our DNA, the field of epigenetics. How has that impacted our memories of what was, of what has been? And how can we now recall that information and realize we were always meant to go slowly? It is a shame of being forced into northern cities when we think about the Great Migration, right? Out of survival into these cities where people went fast, where people shamed you for being from the South, right? Talking slowly, moving slowly. When that was always the way. When that was always the way. That was human. And we know we feel it in our bodies. We feel our humanity return when we adopt a practice of rest. So as I'm winding down this podcast episode, first of all, I want to ask you to subscribe if you enjoyed this episode. Please like and share if it resonated with you. Let me know how you're going slowly, how you are resisting the shame, how you are becoming re-embodied. That's another step to going slowly, coming back into your body and really tapping into your body's signals. Our ancestors who were enslaved did not have the chance to be embodied. They had to work against their body's natural signals to slow down, to rest, to care for themselves, to take a day off. They were not afforded that. And so this entire society has socialized us as machines. And so by coming back into our bodies, we realize that we have the power of breath, that we must breathe, that we must rest, that we must care for ourselves, treat ourselves gently as human beings. We're reclaiming our humanity. No longer will we be robots while someone else has the remote control and tells us what to do with our bodies when we know what our bodies need. We know that they need to go slowly to rest. We've seen the ramifications, the physical, mental, spiritual ramifications of moving faster than your body wants to go. And so how can we resist that shame, know that our ancestors knew the way already, reclaim the knowledge that they've already left us with, that literally is housed within our bodies when we think about epigenetics, how things are passed down from generation to generation? How can we go back and reclaim that knowledge to prioritize our wellness, our care, and to heal from the shame of going slowly? Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, y'all. Bye.